3:47 a.m. Boat motor screaming like a chainsaw from hell. I stumble outside and there's HOA President Tiffany Vandenberg dumping chemicals around my grandfather's dock while Deputy Rick films everything, using his badge to intimidate me into compliance.
By police authority, your lake access is terminated. 24 hours or you're under arrest.
Then this pharmaceutical witch does something so evil I'm still shaking. Deliberately rams my grandfather's memorial urn, scattering his ashes into her poisonous chemical soup. That's what happens when you defy police orders. They thought dirty cop intimidation would force me to surrender my family's lake. What they didn't know? My grandfather left me one legal notice, a single piece of paper, that was about to end their lake access forever and destroy their lives completely. But how we got here is absolutely insane. What would you do if corrupt police tried stealing your family legacy? Drop your story below and tell me where you're watching from. Let me tell you how this nightmare started. My name's Bryce Kellerman, union electrician, and I inherited something most people only dream of, my own private lake. Not lake access, not lakefront rights. The entire damn 65-acre lake. Crystal Lake has been ours since 1981, when my grandfather bought it from the state for $89,000, about $280 in today's money. Lake bottom, water rights, 800 feet of pristine shoreline. Every morning, coffee steam mixes with lake mist, while pine scent drifts off the water. Hand-carved dock posts, worn butter smooth by 40 years of fishing lines and bare summer feet. Grandpa built everything himself. Log cabin, cedar dock, stone fire circle. His tools still hang in the boathouse, metal handles worn smooth by calloused electrician hands, waiting for projects that'll never come. The smell of old wood and WD-40 still clings to everything he touched. This paradise predates any HOA by 17 years. They built their suburban kingdom around our lake. Then Hurricane Karen made landfall. Tiffany Vandenberg, Big Pharma Regional Director, who moved from Greenwich 18 months ago. You know the type. That's completely unacceptable. I demand to speak to management. Do you know who I am? She dropped $1.4 million on this glass and steel monstrosity that looks like a pharmaceutical lab crashed into the forest. The woman reeks of expensive perfume, some fancy French stuff that has no business mixing with natural lake earthiness. Her Tesla tires crunch on gravel during neighborhood improvement walks, where she takes notes on which properties need aesthetic enhancement. My F-150? Commercial vehicle contamination. Original cabins? Substandard structures dragging down property values. My grandfather's handmade dock? Unsightly wooden eyesore requiring immediate modernization. 6 months after arriving, she launches her HOA presidential campaign with catered wine and cheese events. Her platform? Modernize this backwater community and bring property values into the 21st century. The previous president, a farmer's daughter, believed in live and let live. Tiffany believed in comply or die. Crystal Lake Estates HOA, 62 homes total. 18 original families like mine. Blue-collar, multi-generational weekend retreat folks. 12 corporate transplants following Tiffany's community enhancement crusade. The rest just wanted peaceful lake life without drama. Here's where stupid meets crazy. Tuesday morning, I'm enjoying coffee on my dock when certified mail arrives. The envelope feels expensive, heavy paper, embossed letterhead. Inside, lake usage violation notice in bold, red letters. I'm reading this thinking someone's pranking me. Tiffany claims my lake ownership violates new community standards. She demands $50,000 annually in lake usage fees, or I must cease all recreational lake activities immediately. $50,000 to use my own lake. But wait, it gets better. $2,000 daily fines plus immediate police enforcement if I don't comply within 30 days. The letter claims HOA has jurisdiction over community water resources, and my antiquated usage rights are superseded by modern regulatory frameworks. I call her up, polite as Sunday service. Ma'am, there's been a misunderstanding. My family owns this lake. Mr. Kellerman, she purrs in that MBA condescension. Community standards have evolved considerably since your arrangement. was established. Grandfathered privileges cannot supersede contemporary property management protocols. Property management protocols. For my lake, that predates her HOA by 2 decades. With respect, Ms. Vandenberg, you can't charge fees for property you don't own. Long pause, then the mask slips. Listen carefully, you backwoods electrician. This community is moving forward, with or without your cooperation. Adapt or leave. Those are your options. The line goes dead. Coffee tastes bitter suddenly, steam rising like funeral incense in the morning air. That night, I'm grilling burgers when headlights sweep across my driveway. Tiffany's Range Rover parks blocking my dock access. She climbs out wearing a business suit to a lake barbecue, clicking across wooden boards and designer heels like she's inspecting conquered territory. 30 days, Mr. Kellerman. Then we involve law enforcement, standing on my grandfather's dock, threatening me with police over my own lake. Big mistake, lady. Huge mistake. Because what Tiffany didn't know was that my quiet electrician grandfather was way smarter than her fancy MBA. The documents he left me were about to turn her little power trip into the most expensive lesson of her life. 3 days after Tiffany's little dock invasion, a process server shows up at my door. Professional guy in a cheap suit, apologetic smile, hands me a manila envelope thick as a phone book. Sorry, man, just doing my job. The smell of expensive legal paper hits me first, that crisp, intimidating scent that screams billable hours. 32 pages from Whitman, Sheffield & Associates, $800 an hour lawyers with Lake Michigan views. The letterhead alone probably costs more than my truck payment. The cease and desist claims my lake ownership is superseded by community development standards and demands I immediately discontinue all unauthorized water usage activities. 48 hours to comply or face swift legal consequences, including criminal trespassing charges. Criminal trespassing on my own lake. These people have balls the size of bowling pins. I'm reading this legal fiction when something Grandpa always said echoes in my head. When lawyers start talking, smart men start digging. Back in my union days, I learned that when someone threatens you with fancy paperwork, you better have fancier paperwork to fight back. Property disputes are like electrical circuits. You need to trace every wire to find the real power source. The basement gun safe smells like WD-40 and decades of careful documentation when I crack it open. Grandpa kept everything. Receipts, contracts, even grocery lists. Manila folders organized with electrician precision, labeled in his spidery blue ink. Then I find the thick one. Lake purchase, permanent records. Holy mother of pearl. The 1981 documents tell a story that would make Tiffany's lawyers weep. Grandpa didn't buy lakefront property. He bought the entire lake from Wisconsin DNR for $89,000. Every page stamped, notarized, bulletproof. Exclusive ownership of lake bottom, water rights, and recreational usage in perpetuity. Protected against future development interference or homeowner association regulation. The old man had literally bought paradise with a federal warranty. But here's where it gets beautiful. There's a 1985 EPA conservation easement I'd never seen. Grandpa enrolled our lake in federal environmental protection, which meant Tiffany wasn't just messing with state property law. She was violating federal conservation statutes. My coffee's gone cold by the time I finish reading. All those years thinking Grandpa was just a lucky electrician. Turns out he was playing 4D chess while everyone else was playing tic-tac-toe. That's when my phone rings. Tiffany, right on schedule. Mr. Kellerman, I trust you've received our legal notification. The clock is ticking. Actually, Tiffany, I've been doing some research of my own. I can practically hear her expensive manicure tapping against her phone case. Turns out my family's lake ownership is federally protected. EPA Conservation Easement, 1985. You might want to Google what happens when people interfere with federal environmental programs. Silence. Then, that's impossible. The HOA has been managing lake resources for 15 years. Managing resources you don't own. For fees you shouldn't be collecting. That's not management, that's fraud. The line goes dead faster than a blown fuse. Next morning, I'm at the county courthouse with my evidence and a mission. The basement records office smells like government bureaucracy and forgotten dreams, fluorescent lights buzzing like angry wasps. Mrs. Henderson, the clerk who's been here since dinosaurs roamed, knows where every document lives. Kellerman Lake purchase? She vanishes into filing cabinet purgatory, returns with a cardboard treasure chest. Fascinating case. Haven't pulled these in decades. The county records are devastating for Tiffany's case. Crystal Lake Estates, HOA incorporated in 1998, 17 years after Grandpa's purchase. Their own incorporation specifically excludes pre-existing private water ownership from HOA jurisdiction. They literally wrote themselves out of authority over my property. Mrs. Henderson leans closer, voice dropping conspiratorially. Between you and me, honey, that HOA's been collecting lake maintenance fees for 15 years. $250 annually times 47 households, nearly $200,000 for a lake they don't own. Now I understand Tiffany's desperation. When this comes out, she's not facing embarrassment, she's facing fraud charges. That evening, Dorothy Kowalski shuffles over while I'm grilling dinner. 74, sharp as her husband's old woodworking tools, carrying a manila folder like it contains state secrets. Bryce, I've been watching this nonsense. Her arthritic hands reveal planning commission documents from 1981. My late husband helped design this development. Your grandfather's lake ownership was specifically preserved as environmental protection. The pieces snapped together like a perfect electrical connection. Grandpa hadn't just bought property. He'd bought into a federal conservation program designed to prevent exactly what Tiffany was attempting. My phone buzzes. Unknown number. Mr. Kellerman? Sarah Adrian, Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. I understand you're having property rights issues with potential fraud implications. I'd very much like to discuss this story. Word travels fast in small communities, especially when it involves federal law violations and pharmaceutical executives who've stepped in something they can't wash off their designer shoes. Time for Tiffany to learn that some electrical circuits shouldn't be touched without proper protection. Sarah Adrian's article hits the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel website at 6 a.m. Tuesday. Local HOA accused of collecting fees for lake they don't own. By 8 a.m., my phone's exploding. By 9 a.m., 3 sheriff's cruisers are parked in my driveway like I'm running a meth lab. The lead deputy climbs out, big guy, mirrored sunglasses, hand resting on his duty belt like he's expecting armed resistance. His nameplate reads, R. Vandenberg. Of course it fucking does. In small towns, corruption runs in families like genetic diseases. Mr. Kellerman? Deputy Rick Vandenberg, Washburn County Sheriff. We've received reports of a dangerous individual refusing lawful eviction orders. Dangerous individual? That's adorable. Coming from a guy whose sister-in-law just got exposed for fraud in the morning paper. Which eviction order would that be, Deputy? The one for property I actually own? Sir, we have authority to remove trespassers from community property. Gather your belongings and vacate immediately. Diesel exhaust from 3 idling patrol cars pollutes the morning lake mist, like industrial poison spoiling paradise. Heavy boots stomp across grandfather's sacred dock, while radio static murders the peaceful loon calls. Here's something I learned during 20 years of union negotiations. When authority figures show up without proper documentation, they're usually bluffing. Police can't enforce HOA violations on private property. That requires actual court orders from actual judges, not pharmaceutical executives with delusions of legal authority. I pull out my phone and hit record. Wisconsin's a one-party consent state, something every working man learns when management starts making threats. Deputy, I'll need to see the court-issued warrant for this eviction. My voice stays steady while my heart pounds. Also your badge number, incident report number, and supervisor contact. That stops him cold. Badge number? Standard procedure for official police action involving property disputes. Building inspectors tried this same intimidation garbage back when I was wiring commercial projects. Authority without accountability is just bullying with uniforms. Rick's face turns red above his tactical vest. You're interfering with police business. I'm documenting police business. Big difference. Behind me, Dorothy's screen door creaks. Smart woman, close enough to witness, far enough to stay safe. 74 years old and still sharper than most cops I've met. Deputy Vandenberg, my family owns this lake under federal conservation easement. Your sister-in-law knows this, which is why she's using badge intimidation instead of legitimate legal channels. His hand moves toward the handcuffs. How do you know my family relationships? Small town, deputy. Everyone knows everyone. Question is, are you here as law enforcement or as Tiffany's personal goon squad? That's when my phone buzzes with Sarah Adrian calling back. Rick sees Milwaukee Journal Sentinel on the screen, and his whole tough guy act evaporates. Amazing how quickly bullies retreat when they spot witnesses with press credentials. Mr. Kellerman, we'll be monitoring this situation. Any community standard violations will result in immediate arrest. Which standards specifically, Deputy? The ones that don't apply to my federal conservation property? Radio chatter and diesel fumes as 3 patrol cars slink away like scolded dogs. That afternoon brings certified mail from the HOA treasurer. Emergency lake assessment, $18,500 for critical infrastructure repairs on infrastructure that doesn't exist, targeting only properties that won't kiss Tiffany's pharmaceutical ring. The letter threatens property liens and sheriff's sales within 21 days. 18 grand for maintaining a lake they don't own. The audacity is almost impressive. Dorothy appears with steaming tuna casserole and the expression of someone who's witnessed enough bullshit for several lifetimes. That woman visited me yesterday, she says, setting down dinner that smells like childhood comfort. Said I should think carefully about supporting non-compliant neighbors if I wanted to avoid complications with my property taxes. Property tax threats. Tiffany's expanding her criminal portfolio. Did you record it? Honey, 47 years married to a contractor, taught me to document everything. She produces a digital recorder, especially when pharmaceutical executives start channeling mob bosses. Crystal clear audio, Tiffany's voice unmistakable. Mrs. Kowalski, supporting troublemakers could lead to unfortunate scrutiny of your assessments. I'd hate to see administrative errors cause your taxes to increase. Extortion, witness intimidation, criminal conspiracy. The woman's building a federal case against herself with pharmaceutical precision. There's more, Dorothy continues. My friend Jenny at the county assessor says Tiffany's been calling about procedures for challenging property ownership and forcing sales for unpaid fees. The endgame becomes clear. Manufacture fake debts, use corrupt cops for enforcement, steal the lake through fraudulent proceedings. Actually brilliant if you ignore the whole federal felony problem. Sarah Adrian calls again. Mr. Kellerman, this story's exploding. The financial records I've uncovered show systematic fraud across multiple properties. Can we meet tonight? Bring everything. This is going to be huge. Time for Hurricane Karen to discover what happens when pharmaceutical executives try to muscle federal conservation law. Some pills are too bitter to swallow. Sarah's second article drops Thursday morning like a federal anvil. FBI opens investigation into HOA lake fraud. By noon, my dock looks like a war zone. Someone took a chainsaw to the support posts during the night, 70% cut through, leaving grandfather's 40-year masterpiece hanging by cedar splinters over dark water. Fresh sawdust floats like wooden confetti, while gasoline residue burns my nostrils, industrial violence poisoning natural beauty. But the real gut punch? My boat lift motor, destroyed with surgical precision. Metal shavings poured into the oil reservoir like glitter in a birthday cake, turning $6,800 of hydraulic perfection into expensive scrap metal. These bastards knew exactly what they were targeting. Here's something I learned wiring commercial buildings. Criminals always think they're smarter than they actually are. Security systems are like electrical circuits. You install them properly, they capture everything. My 4K trail camera footage shows Deputy Rick's personal F-250 pulling up at 2:17 a.m., unloading a Milwaukee cordless chainsaw, and methodically destroying my family's legacy. The hardware store receipt tucked under his windshield the next morning, purchased with his personal Visa, 24 hours before the vandalism. You'd think a sworn law enforcement officer would understand evidence better, but corruption apparently causes brain damage. That afternoon brings Wisconsin DNR Inspector Janet Walsh in a state pickup, looking like she'd rather investigate literally anything else on Earth. Mr. Kellerman, I'm required to investigate environmental violation complaints regarding your property. Environmental violations. On federally protected conservation land. The irony could kill smaller mammals. What specific violations, Inspector? Anonymous report claims your septic system is contaminating lake ecosystem. She unloads water testing equipment worth more than my annual truck payments. Comprehensive analysis required. 6 hours and 47 water samples later, Inspector Walsh delivers the most beautiful karma I've witnessed. My lake area tests cleaner than Rocky Mountain spring water, while Tiffany's shoreline shows chemical contamination consistent with unpermitted septic discharge directly into protected wetlands. Mr. Kellerman, your property exceeds environmental standards by remarkable margins. Walsh packs expensive equipment with obvious relief. However, I'm documenting potential violations from that large glass residence upstream. The contamination source appears definitively located there. Environmental justice served with scientific precision. That evening, Dorothy appears carrying a manila folder thick as a phone book and wearing the satisfied smile of someone who's been saving ammunition for decades. Honey, my late husband wasn't just planning commission. He documented everything from the original lake development. Arthritis-twisted fingers reveal municipal files from 1981. Your grandfather's purchase was mandatory under state environmental law. The documents annihilate Tiffany's legal foundation. Original development approval specifically required Kellerman family lake ownership for environmental protection. Mandatory 40% shoreline preservation, federal conservation easement, protected wildlife habitat status. The HOA incorporation papers deliberately omitted these requirements, not oversight, calculated fraud designed to conceal their complete lack of lake authority. Gets better, Dorothy continues, spreading papers like she's dealing winning cards. The original developer declared bankruptcy in 1987. Banks can't transfer property rights that never existed. Every lakefront deed in this neighborhood describes access to property no one could legally sell, which means 46 families paid for lake privileges that were never available for purchase. They've been sending HOA maintenance fees for imaginary property rights, while Tiffany collected money for services she couldn't legally provide. The legal principle here is simple. You can't sell what you don't own, and you can't regulate what you never controlled. Property fraud compounds like interest. Small lies become federal cases when enough money changes hands. My phone rings. Unknown number, but I'm getting used to important calls from strangers. Mr. Kellerman? Special Agent Patricia Adrian, FBI, Financial Crimes Division. We understand you're experiencing harassment connected to potential federal environmental and fraud violations. Could we schedule an evidence review meeting? FBI, the big leagues, where pharmaceutical executives learn that federal environmental crimes carry prison sentences longer than drug patents. Agent Adrian, I'd be honored to discuss this situation. When works for you? Tomorrow, 9 a.m. at your property. We'll document the vandalism and review your harassment evidence. Bring everything: financial records, communications, witness statements. After hanging up, Dorothy refills her coffee with hands steady as surgical instruments. You know what I love about justice, Bryce? Sometimes it takes 40 years to mature, but when it arrives, it brings federal badges. That night, I sit on my vandalized dock, listening to loons call across water that's been family property since before Tiffany discovered Wisconsin existed. The federal conservation easement that seemed like grandfather's simple environmental gesture now reveals itself as sophisticated legal warfare designed for exactly this moment. Tomorrow brings FBI agents. Tonight, I'm drinking beer and watching karma hunt down a woman who thought big pharma money could override federal environmental protection. Some pills are too bitter for even pharmaceutical executives to swallow. Agent Adrian arrives Friday morning in an unmarked sedan with government plates and the kind of quiet authority that makes criminals sweat. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, briefcase that probably contains enough evidence to topple small governments. Her partner, EPA criminal agent Thompson, looks like he bench presses environmental criminals between coffee breaks. Mr. Kellerman, thank you for your patience. Adrian's handshake could crack walnuts. We've been building cases against systematic HOA fraud across the Great Lakes. Your situation is the missing puzzle piece that connects everything. We tour my vandalized dock while Thompson documents federal crimes with photography equipment worth more than most people's cars. Each camera click sounds like a courtroom gavel, capturing evidence that will echo in federal prison cells. The morning air smells like sawdust and approaching justice. Agent Adrian, what exactly am I sitting on here? She opens her briefcase with the reverence of someone handling nuclear material. This, Mr. Kellerman, is why your grandfather was smarter than anyone realized. The document she produces looks ordinary enough. Government letterhead, official seals, boring legal language. But when she explains what it means, my coffee mug almost slips from my hands. Federal Conservation Trust Registration, 1985. Your grandfather didn't just buy a lake. He enrolled it in a program that provides absolute protection against any interference, local, state, or otherwise. The paper feels heavier than it should, like it carries the weight of federal law enforcement. When someone messes with federally protected conservation property, Thompson adds, still photographing chainsaw damage, they're committing environmental terrorism. Mandatory minimums, federal prison, life-destroying consequences. Here's the beautiful part, Adrian continues, spreading documents across my kitchen table like she's dealing federal justice cards. We've discovered Crystal Lake Estates HOA collected $340,000 in lake maintenance fees over 15 years for property they have zero authority to manage. That's not bookkeeping error, Thompson grins. That's organized fraud with a paper trail visible from space. Then Adrian produces the smoking gun, literally signed by Tiffany's own pharmaceutical hand. Last year, Ms. Vandenberg signed federal conservation acknowledgement forms as HOA president. She certified understanding of environmental protections and promised regulatory compliance. Then immediately violated every single protection, Thompson laughs. Federal prosecutors call that signed confession with criminal intent. The irony tastes sweeter than grandfather's morning coffee. Tiffany's obsession with corporate documentation created a federal evidence trail leading straight to her designer doorstep. So what's our nuclear option, Agent Adrian? She produces a single sheet of paper, bristling with official seals and federal authority. This is it. One legal notice to EPA Criminal Division that triggers automatic federal investigation with full enforcement power. One legal notice. The exact phrase from every news headline that's about to destroy Tiffany's life. This single document ends their lake authority immediately and permanently. Federal jurisdiction supersedes all local corruption, Mr. Kellerman. Federal marshals handle enforcement, federal prosecutors handle charges, federal prisons handle sentences. Adrian seals the notice in an envelope marked with enough government warnings to scare pharmaceutical executives into cardiac episodes. Monday morning, 9 a.m., we file this notice and end their access to everything. Your lake, their freedom, their pharmaceutical careers. Thompson's camera clicks one final time. Ms. Vandenberg wanted federal-level consequences. She's about to receive them. I'm holding destiny in government stationary form. 40 years of quiet family lake ownership revealed as sophisticated federal protection that no amount of big pharma money can override. Agent Adrian, after Monday morning, what happens to people who continue harassing federal conservation property? Federal obstruction of justice charges, mandatory federal prison sentences, complete asset forfeiture. Her smile could freeze pharmaceutical stock prices. One legal notice, Mr. Kellerman. That's all it takes to end their access to everything they value. As federal sedans disappear down my driveway, I sit on grandfather's damaged dock, holding the most powerful piece of paper in Wisconsin. Monday morning, we serve Tiffany her federal eviction notice from Freedom. Some pills even pharmaceutical executives can't swallow. Monday morning, 6 a.m. Coffee tastes like victory brewing, while I review the federal paperwork that's about to detonate Tiffany's pharmaceutical empire. Agent Adrian's team arrives at sunrise. 3 black SUVs filled with enough federal authority to level small countries. The filing happens at exactly 9 a.m. One legal notice uploaded to EPA Criminal Division servers, automatically triggering the most comprehensive federal investigation Washburn County has ever seen. Real-time notification systems alert FBI, Financial Crimes, Civil Rights Division, Environmental Protection Agency Criminal Investigation, and U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Wisconsin. Federal conservation violation notice filed and accepted, Agent Thompson announces, his laptop screen glowing with government efficiency. Full criminal investigation activated. Automatic asset freezing authorized. Federal jurisdiction established. The smell of fresh legal documents mixes with pine forest air as our makeshift command center transforms Dorothy's farmhouse into federal case headquarters. Evidence walls covered with timeline maps, financial records, police harassment documentation. Her dining room table disappears under boxes of exhibits that'll send Tiffany to federal prison. Mr. Kellerman, we need you to understand the scope of what's happening, Adrian explains, while coordinating with EPA headquarters via encrypted phone. This isn't just about your lake anymore. We've identified organized environmental fraud across 17 states. Your case provides the federal nexus we needed. Dorothy appears with industrial-strength coffee and homemade cinnamon rolls, playing grandmother to federal agents who appreciate civilian support during complex investigations. Her arthritis-gnarled hands steady as surgeons' tools, while she organizes witness statements from Alliance families who've endured months of HOA harassment. "Boys, I've been documenting corruption longer than some of you've been alive," she tells Agent Martinez, while handing him evidence folders organized with military precision. That pharmaceutical woman picked the wrong community to terrorize. Milwaukee Journal Sentinel reporter Sarah Adrian coordinates media strategy from her laptop, positioned near Dorothy's kitchen window. Federal environmental crime story goes national Wednesday. Environmental law professors from 3 universities want interviews. Netflix documentary crew arrives Thursday. The social media campaign explodes across platforms faster than federal indictments. Hashtag Federal Lake Justice trends nationally, while environmental groups share stories of HOA fraud from communities nationwide. Crystal Lake becomes the symbol of federal protection against local corruption. Tiffany's pharmaceutical employer suspended her pending federal investigation, Sarah reports, scrolling through breaking news alerts. Stock price down 12% since fraud revelations. Corporate compliance officer issued statement about zero tolerance for criminal behavior. Financial warfare accelerates beyond Tiffany's ability to control. Her husband's construction company loses contracts as clients discover federal fraud connections. Bank accounts freeze under federal seizure warrants. Connecticut mansion enters foreclosure proceedings as legal bills consume liquid assets. Agent Thompson coordinates surveillance from Dorothy's living room, federal monitoring equipment humming alongside her antique grandfather clock. Subject Vandenberg made 17 phone calls this morning attempting damage control. Subject Vandenberg Rick requested emergency legal representation. Both subjects exhibiting signs of extreme psychological distress. How extreme? I ask, watching federal justice machinery grind pharmaceutical arrogance into legal powder. Panic-level distress, the kind that leads to desperate decisions and federal obstruction charges. By afternoon, our alliance grows to include families from 6 surrounding counties, facing similar HOA environmental fraud. Federal protection extends beyond Crystal Lake as EPA investigators discover systematic conservation easement violations across the region. Your grandfather's conservation strategy is being replicated nationwide, Adrian explains during a coordination call with Washington. Environmental law clinics from 12 universities are establishing legal defense funds. Federal legislation is being drafted to strengthen conservation property rights. The humor in all this? Tiffany's corporate efficiency created the perfect evidence trail for federal prosecution. Every email demanding lake fees, every falsified HOA document, every pharmaceutical executive signature on federal conservation forms, all preserved in digital evidence that even expensive lawyers can't delete. She documented her own criminal conspiracy with pharmaceutical precision, Thompson laughs while printing email evidence. Corporate training taught her to create paper trails for everything, including federal environmental crimes. Dorothy serves dinner to federal agents and journalists like she's hosting Sunday church social instead of coordinating federal criminal investigation. You know what I love about justice? Sometimes it takes 40 years to ferment properly, but when it's ready, it intoxicates everyone who tastes it. That evening, I sit on my partially repaired dock while federal surveillance teams monitor the lake perimeter. Loon calls echo across water that's been in my family since before federal environmental protection existed. Tomorrow brings federal grand jury proceedings. Tonight brings the satisfaction of knowing one legal notice destroyed pharmaceutical arrogance more thoroughly than chemotherapy destroys cancer cells. My phone buzzes with a text from Sarah Adrian. Wednesday morning, CNN wants live interview about federal environmental protection. You ready for national television? Ready? I've been ready since Tiffany first threatened my grandfather's legacy with her pharmaceutical entitlement. Time to show America what happens when Big Pharma meets federal environmental law enforcement. Some prescriptions carry side effects worse than the original disease. Tiffany's about to discover federal prison is one of them. Tuesday afternoon brings the most beautiful sight I've witnessed. Federal agents executing search warrants simultaneously at Tiffany's pharmaceutical palace, Deputy Rick's house, and the HOA office. Black SUVs, evidence collection teams, the whole federal justice parade. But Tiffany's not going quietly into pharmaceutical prison. My trail cameras capture her midnight meeting with some slick development company executive in the Home Depot parking lot. 2 hours of animated conversation, briefcases exchanging hands, documents shuffled like illegal poker cards. She's trying to sell lake development rights she doesn't possess to buyers who don't research federal environmental protection. That's wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy, Agent Adrian explains Wednesday morning while reviewing surveillance footage. She's adding federal charges faster than we can process paperwork. The development company? Pinnacle Properties, specialists in converting underutilized waterfront into luxury subdivisions. Their business model involves buying lake access cheap, subdividing aggressively, selling expensive. What they didn't research: federal conservation easements that make development impossible and criminal. Mr. Kellerman, she's offering $4.2 million for lake development rights. Thompson shows me FBI surveillance photos, complete with forged HOA board signatures authorizing the sale. $4 million for property she doesn't own, using authority she doesn't possess, selling rights that don't exist. It's almost artistic in its criminal creativity. That's when Deputy Rick escalates from harassment to federal terrorism. Wednesday evening, multiple patrol cars begin wellness checks at my property. Every 2 hours, different officers claiming anonymous reports about armed environmental extremists and potential violence against community. The psychological warfare intensifies. Spotlights sweep my windows at 2 a.m. Tactical vehicles idle in my driveway during family dinners. Radio chatter disrupts peaceful evenings like electronic pollution contaminating natural silence. They're trying to break you psychologically, Agent Martinez explains during a federal protection briefing. When people can't win legally, they resort to intimidation campaigns designed to force compliance through exhaustion. Here's something I learned during union strikes. When management escalates to psychological warfare, they're admitting legal defeat. Harassment campaigns signal desperation, not strength. Federal protection against corrupt police means their intimidation tactics now constitute additional felonies. Thursday brings the most insane escalation yet. County Commissioner Janet Walsh, one of the few honest politicians left in Wisconsin, calls with information that makes my morning coffee taste like victory champagne. Bryce, I need to report attempted bribery. Tiffany Vandenberg offered me $200,000 cash for emergency zoning variance to override federal environmental protection. $200,000 in cash to ignore federal law. Commissioner Walsh, please tell me you recorded that conversation. Honey, I've been dealing with pharmaceutical executives longer than you've been breathing. Of course I recorded it. The FBI wire Walsh wore during their lunch meeting captured every incriminating word. Tiffany's voice, crystal clear. Federal environmental protection is just regulatory theater, Janet. $200,000 solves any documentation problems you might discover. Federal bribery charges carry 20-year sentences. Environmental crime violations add 15 more years. Criminal conspiracy multiplies everything. Tiffany's pharmaceutical career is evolving into federal prison biography. She also mentioned using pharmaceutical industry connections to destroy your electrical contracting business, Walsh continues. Something about making sure unemployed electricians can't afford legal defense. Economic terrorism added to the federal charges. Tiffany's really going for the criminal behavior grand slam. That afternoon, my phone rings with calls from clients I've wired for 20 years. Someone's been spreading rumors about federal investigation and unreliable contractor facing criminal charges. 3 major projects canceled. 2 commercial contracts terminated. My electrical business hemorrhaging faster than Tiffany's pharmaceutical stock price. Mr. Kellerman, we're documenting systematic economic retaliation, Agent Adrian explains during our evening briefing. Corporate network intimidation campaigns violate federal civil rights statutes. Each canceled contract adds conspiracy charges. The beautiful irony? Tiffany's pharmaceutical industry connections create electronic evidence trails. FBI financial crime specialists can follow like roadmaps to federal convictions. Every threatening phone call, every corporate pressure campaign, every attempt to destroy my livelihood, all recorded by companies with federal compliance monitoring requirements. She's using big pharma infrastructure to commit federal crimes, Thompson laughs while printing email evidence. It's like using corporate letterhead to threaten federal judges. The stupidity is almost artistic. Friday evening brings breaking news that makes my heart race. Pharmaceutical executive arrested on federal environmental terrorism charges. Sarah Adrian's exclusive coverage shows federal agents leading Tiffany out of her office in handcuffs. Pharmaceutical career ending in orange jumpsuit humiliation. But here's the twist that makes everything perfect. Commissioner Walsh's bribery recording also captured Tiffany admitting to systematic lake fee fraud, police corruption conspiracy, and plans to eliminate environmental protection through any means necessary. Federal prosecutors now have signed confessions, recorded admissions, financial evidence, environmental crime documentation, and enough criminal conspiracy proof to keep Tiffany in federal prison longer than some pharmaceutical patents last. Tomorrow brings federal grand jury proceedings. Tonight brings the satisfaction of watching pharmaceutical arrogance meet federal environmental law enforcement. Some chemistry experiments produce explosive results. Tiffany just learned federal justice is one of them. Saturday, 2:17 a.m. Motion sensors trigger like nuclear alarms across my security system. Outside, Tiffany's pharmaceutical empire is about to go up in actual flames. She's crouched beside my cabin with 2 gasoline containers, pouring accelerant around the foundation like she's conducting a backyard chemistry experiment. The security floodlights paint her in harsh white reality, designer yoga outfits soaked in petroleum, prescription pharmaceuticals mixed with federal desperation. Her plan was actually sophisticated. Burn down my cabin and grandfather's conservation documents, plant evidence pointing to environmental activist terrorism, then claim federal protection paperwork was lost in the tragic extremist attack. What she didn't plan on, military-grade surveillance systems installed by federal agents who've been expecting exactly this level of pharmaceutical desperation. Every second captured in 4K federal evidence quality. Every gasoline pour documented with timestamp precision. Every federal crime preserved for prosecution specialists who live for cases this comprehensive. The cabin's steel I-beam construction, grandfather's engineering paranoia about Wisconsin winters, prevents serious structural damage. But watching someone try to burn down 40 years of family legacy fills me with rage that could power electrical grids. That's when federal tactical teams emerge from forest positions, like environmental justice ninjas. Agent Thompson's voice cuts through pre-dawn darkness, with federal authority that could stop pharmaceutical research trials. Tiffany Vandenberg, FBI, drop the accelerant and place your hands where we can see them. The look on her face when those tactical flashlights hit her. Pure pharmaceutical terror mixed with federal reality. All that big pharma confidence evaporating faster than gasoline in Wisconsin winter air. "This is a misunderstanding," she screams, while federal handcuffs click with finality. "I'm conducting environmental assessment for federal compliance." Environmental assessment. At 2 a.m., with gasoline accelerant. The woman's desperation has achieved pharmaceutical-grade absurdity. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for federal arson, environmental terrorism, and obstruction of federal conservation enforcement," Agent Martinez announces, while reading rights that'll echo in federal prison cells for decades. By sunrise, federal crime scene investigators transform my property into evidence collection headquarters. Every gasoline fingerprint documented, every pharmaceutical desperate decision preserved for federal prosecution that'll make big pharma executives rethink environmental crime careers. Mr. Kellerman, attempted arson of federal conservation property carries mandatory minimum 25 years, Adrian explains, while coordinating with U.S. Attorney's Office. Environmental terrorism against protected ecosystems adds federal life sentences. The beautiful justice? Tiffany's corporate training and comprehensive documentation created perfect evidence trails for every federal crime. Her pharmaceutical precision in criminal planning provided prosecutors with organizational charts for systematic environmental fraud. Sunday brings the domino collapse that makes federal prosecutors smile like Christmas morning. Deputy Rick, facing his own federal conspiracy charges, offers complete cooperation in exchange for reduced sentences. His testimony reveals systematic police corruption, deeper than toxic pharmaceutical waste. He's provided evidence of falsified police reports, abuse of authority, civil rights violations under color of law, Thompson explains while printing cooperation agreements. Plus, recordings of conspiracy planning sessions with subject Vandenberg. The psychological pressure cracks pharmaceutical arrogance like cheap laboratory equipment. Tiffany's husband's construction company files bankruptcy after losing federal contracts. Their Connecticut mansion enters foreclosure. Big Pharma employer terminates employment with federal criminal clause, voiding retirement benefits. She's financially destroyed, federally charged, and pharmaceutically unemployable, Sarah Adrian reports during live CNN coverage. The woman who tried stealing a lake just lost access to everything: freedom, career, financial future. Monday afternoon brings the most satisfying federal justice moment, watching Tiffany's Range Rover get towed from the courthouse parking lot while she sits in federal detention, awaiting trial that could last longer than some pharmaceutical development cycles. The HOA office gets shuttered by federal court order. All collected lake fees frozen pending restitution calculations. The organization that thought it controlled Crystal Lake discovers federal environmental law controls everything. Federal grand jury returned indictments on 17 counts, Agent Adrian announces during our final briefing. Environmental terrorism, organized fraud, civil rights violations, federal bribery, criminal conspiracy. She's facing federal prison sentences that exceed pharmaceutical career lengths. That evening, I sit on my rebuilt dock, listening to loons call across water that's been federally protected since before Tiffany discovered Wisconsin existed. The federal conservation easement that seemed like grandfather's simple environmental gesture revealed itself as sophisticated legal warfare designed for exactly this pharmaceutical arrogance. Tomorrow brings federal trial proceedings that'll set environmental protection precedent nationwide. Tonight brings the satisfaction of knowing one legal notice destroyed Big Pharma entitlement more thoroughly than federal drug regulation destroys unsafe medications. Dorothy appears with celebration dinner and wisdom earned through 40 years of watching justice ferment. You know what I love about federal environmental law, Bryce? It's like grandfather's electrical work. Invisible until someone tries to mess with it, then powerful enough to burn down everything they value. Federal marshals patrol the lake perimeter while pharmaceutical evidence gets organized into prosecution exhibits. Crystal Lake is finally safe from corporate terrorism, protected by federal authority that no amount of Big Pharma money can override. Some chemical reactions produce toxic results. Tiffany's pharmaceutical career just became one of them. Federal courthouse, Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. The media circus outside looks like pharmaceutical stock market crash coverage. CNN trucks, network news crews, environmental advocacy protesters holding signs reading "Federal Justice for Lake Thieves" and "Big Pharma meets bigger federal law." Judge Patricia Martinez presides over what legal experts are calling the most comprehensive environmental crime prosecution in Great Lakes history. Federal courtroom packed to capacity with alliance families, environmental advocates, federal prosecutors, and enough media coverage to make pharmaceutical executives nationwide reconsider lake theft careers. Tiffany enters an orange federal jumpsuit, designer confidence replaced by pharmaceutical defeat. The woman who once threatened my family with police intimidation now shuffles in federal shackles, facing life sentences that exceed most drug patent protection periods. Your Honor, the United States presents comprehensive evidence of organized environmental terrorism against federally protected conservation property. Federal prosecutor Janet Walsh announces with authority that could regulate pharmaceutical industries. The evidence presentation lasts 6 hours. 90-foot timeline displays showing systematic fraud patterns, environmental destruction photographs projected on courtroom screens, contaminated wetlands, damaged ecosystems, 40 years of family legacy nearly destroyed by pharmaceutical arrogance. Financial charts documenting embezzlement exceed pharmaceutical research budgets, $340,000 in stolen lake fees, $200,000 in attempted bribery, $4 million in fraudulent development schemes. The numbers scroll across federal screens like stock prices during pharmaceutical market crashes, but the audio evidence provides the most devastating prosecution moments. Tiffany's recorded voice admitting systematic fraud. Federal environmental protection is regulatory theater. Money solves any documentation problems. Her pharmaceutical precision in documenting criminal conspiracy becomes federal evidence proving organized environmental terrorism with corporate efficiency. Ladies and gentlemen, Prosecutor Walsh addresses the jury with conviction that could convince pharmaceutical skeptics. The defendant used Big Pharma corporate infrastructure to commit federal environmental crimes against protected conservation property owned by families for 40 years. The victim impact statements destroy any remaining sympathy for pharmaceutical criminals. Dorothy's testimony about community terrorism brings federal courtroom to tears. Alliance families describe months of police harassment, property destruction, economic retaliation campaigns designed to force surrender of federal conservation rights. Your Honor, my grandfather bought Crystal Lake legally and enrolled it in federal protection specifically to prevent corporate terrorism like Defendant Vandenberg attempted, I testify, while maintaining eye contact with pharmaceutical arrogance in orange jumpsuit. The federal conservation easement wasn't just environmental protection. It was legal warfare against exactly this kind of big pharma entitlement that thinks money overrides federal law. The defense attorney's closing argument sounds like pharmaceutical damage control. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a misunderstanding between neighbors that escalated beyond reasonable proportions. Misunderstanding between neighbors. Federal environmental terrorism reduced to neighborhood disagreement. Judge Martinez's response silences pharmaceutical apologetics permanently. Counsel, federal environmental crimes against protected conservation property aren't neighborhood misunderstandings. They're federal felonies with mandatory minimum sentences designed to prevent exactly this corporate environmental terrorism. The jury deliberation lasts 47 minutes, barely enough time to review financial evidence documenting systematic pharmaceutical fraud. On the charge of federal environmental terrorism, guilty. On the charge of organized fraud, guilty. On the charge of civil rights violations, guilty. On the charge of federal bribery, guilty. 17 federal felony convictions, each carrying sentences that exceed pharmaceutical career expectations. Judge Martinez's sentencing delivers federal justice with environmental protection authority. Ms. Vandenberg, your pharmaceutical career taught you corporate efficiency. You applied that efficiency to environmental terrorism against federal conservation property with systematic precision. This court sentences you to 18 years federal imprisonment, $4.8 million in restitution to victims, and environmental restoration, permanent asset forfeiture, and lifetime federal environmental crime monitoring. Deputy Rick receives 12 years federal prison, plus permanent law enforcement prohibition. The pharmaceutical police corruption network dismantled with federal efficiency that exceeds drug development timelines. The courtroom erupts in victory celebration that echoes across national environmental advocacy networks. Alliance families embrace through tears of federal justice delivered. Dorothy receives standing ovation for courage that exposed pharmaceutical environmental terrorism. Outside, media coverage broadcasts federal environmental protection victory nationwide. Environmental law professors declare precedent-setting case for conservation property rights. Congressional representatives announce federal legislation strengthening environmental crime enforcement. This case demonstrates federal environmental law provides absolute protection against corporate terrorism. Senator Jennifer Walsh announces during courthouse press conference, "No amount of pharmaceutical money overrides federal conservation authority." The immediate impact extends beyond Crystal Lake. 47 states initiate HOA environmental compliance reviews. Federal Environmental Crime Task Force establishes permanent prosecution division. Environmental law schools add Crystal Lake case study to required federal curriculum. That evening, celebration at restored lakefront draws 800 supporters from across environmental advocacy networks. Federal Conservation Victory Party with live music, community healing, permanent federal protection for family lake ownership. The mic drop moment comes when Judge Martinez's words echo across peaceful water. One federal notice ended their access to everything they valued: freedom, careers, financial futures. Federal environmental law doesn't negotiate with pharmaceutical terrorists. Crystal Lake reflects celebration fireworks, like natural mirror celebrating federal justice delivered against corporate environmental criminals. Some pharmaceutical experiments produce toxic side effects. Tiffany's lake theft career became one of them. 2 years later, Crystal Lake looks like environmental paradise restored. The $4.8 million in federal restitution transformed our community into a model conservation showcase that environmental groups study nationwide. Federal restoration included native shoreline plants, wildlife habitat enhancement, and water quality improvements that exceed pharmaceutical laboratory purity standards. Bald eagles returned for the first time in 40 years. Loons raise families in protected coves. The ecosystem thrives under federal environmental monitoring that prevents future corporate terrorism. Dorothy's farmhouse became the Crystal Lake Environmental Justice Center, offering free legal clinics for communities facing similar HOA environmental fraud. Environment law students from 12 universities intern here annually, learning federal conservation enforcement through practical experience. The Kellerman Conservation Scholarship Fund, funded by Tiffany's seized pharmaceutical assets, provides $50,000 annually to environmental science students. Last year's recipients included 3 young conservationists developing innovative lake protection technologies. My electrical contracting business recovered stronger than before federal protection began. Corporate clients specifically request services from the electrician who defeated Big Pharma environmental terrorism. Federal environmental compliance inspections now include my consultation on proper conservation property electrical systems. You know what I love about federal justice? Dorothy says during our weekly coffee ritual at my rebuilt dock. Sometimes it takes 40 years to ferment properly, but when it's ready, it intoxicates everyone who needs it most. She's 86 now, still documenting community changes with historian precision. Her memoir, When Federal Law Meets Lake Thieves, became required reading in environmental law schools nationwide. The broader impact exceeded our wildest environmental advocacy dreams. The Federal Conservation Property Protection Act passed Congress unanimously, strengthening conservation easement enforcement against local corruption. Environmental crime prosecution increased 400% using Crystal Lake precedent. 42 states now require HOA environmental compliance audits. Federal Environmental Crime Task Force operates permanent regional offices. Corporate environmental terrorism carries enhanced federal penalties that make pharmaceutical executives rethink lake theft strategies. Tiffany serves her federal sentence at minimum security pharmaceutical prison. If federal facilities for corporate environmental criminals can be called minimum anything. Her pharmaceutical career ended permanently with federal environmental terrorism conviction. Big pharma companies now include environmental crime prevention in executive training programs. Deputy Rick's law enforcement career ended with federal civil rights violations. He currently works warehouse logistics at half his former pharmaceutical corruption salary. Federal civil rights monitoring ensures he never approaches law enforcement again. The Crystal Lake community transformed from corporate terrorism target into environmental protection symbol. Property values increased 40% due to federal conservation designation. Ecotourism brings sustainable revenue, supporting local environmental education programs. Every morning, I drink coffee on grandfather's rebuilt dock, while federal conservation protections ensure this paradise remains family legacy for generations. The federal conservation easement that seemed like simple environmental registration revealed itself as sophisticated legal warfare against exactly the corporate terrorism Tiffany attempted. Environmental advocacy groups nationwide use our federal victory as template for conservation property defense. The Crystal Lake model provides legal framework for communities facing similar corporate environmental terrorism. Sarah Adrian won environmental journalism awards for coverage that exposed systematic HOA fraud across multiple states. Her follow-up investigations led to federal prosecutions of pharmaceutical executives in 7 additional cases. Federal environmental protection works exactly like grandfather's electrical systems, invisible until someone tries corrupting it, then powerful enough to illuminate truth and electrify justice. The federal legal notice that destroyed Tiffany's pharmaceutical empire now hangs framed in our Environmental Justice Center, reminding visitors that one document, filed with proper federal authority, can override any amount of corporate environmental terrorism. Next month, we host the first National Environmental Property Rights Conference, bringing together conservationists, federal prosecutors, and communities defending against corporate lake theft attempts. Registration exceeded capacity as environmental advocates share strategies for federal protection enforcement.